A mother dog lies motionless in the snow, her frail body barely rising and falling with each shallow breath. 6 tiny puppies press tightly against her, their fragile forms trembling as the relentless blizzard buries them under a growing blanket of snow. Abandoned and forgotten, they cling desperately to the faintest thread of life. But then, a sound. Crunching footsteps in the snow, cutting through the howling wind. Someone is coming. Could this be their salvation? The town of Havenwood lay silent, blanketed under layers of relentless snow. The howling winds tore through the dense forest, bending branches to their breaking point, while the ground was buried beneath thick, unyielding drifts. It was the kind of storm that forced people indoors, wrapping themselves in warmth and security, away from the bitter chaos outside. Clara, a 60-year-old widow living on the outskirts of town, had spent her evening by the crackling fire in her small, rustic cabin. Her life was quiet and solitary, her days a rhythm of small tasks that kept her occupied and content. Tonight, however, the storm demanded action. The dwindling firewood pile threatened to leave her cabin cold by dawn, and Clara, despite the weather, decided she had no choice but to venture out. Bundling herself in a heavy coat, wool scarf, and sturdy boots, Clara stepped outside, her breath turning to mist in the freezing air. The snowstorm greeted her fiercely, flurries whipping against her face as she trudged toward the woodpile. As she reached for the logs, something unusual caught her eye. A dark shape in the distance, barely visible through the swirling snow. Clara froze, her instincts sharpened by years of country living. "What on earth?" she muttered, squinting into the storm. The shape didn't move, but it was unmistakably out of place. A mound near the edge of the woods, partially buried in the relentless snow. Curiosity and concern compelled Clara forward. She adjusted her scarf and carefully made her way toward the mysterious silhouette, her boots crunching loudly in the snow. As she approached, the scene became clearer, and her heart sank. A golden retriever lay chained to a weathered wooden post, her body curled protectively around 6 tiny puppies. The mother dog's golden yellow coat was frosted and dull, her frame alarmingly thin, ribs visible beneath her matted fur. She wasn't moving, her head resting limply on the snow-covered ground, her eyes closed as if in surrender. The puppies huddled tightly against their mother, their small bodies trembling with cold. Their tiny cries, weak and pitiful, barely rose above the howling wind. Snow clung to their fragile fur, and they looked more like lifeless bundles than living creatures. Clara's chest tightened at the sight. "Oh, you poor souls," she whispered, her voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. "Who could do such a thing?" She knelt beside them, her gloved hands reaching out to touch the mother dog. The cold stiffness of her fur made Clara flinch, but then she noticed a faint rise and fall in the dog's chest. She was alive, barely. Clara's fingers found the thick iron chain looped tightly around the dog's neck, digging into her fur. It was fastened to the post with a heavy padlock. Clara shook her head in disbelief. "How could anyone leave you like this?" she murmured, anger flaring in her chest. The puppies stirred weakly as Clara moved closer. She counted 6 in total, their wide, frightened eyes staring at her with a mix of fear and desperation. Their tiny paws were almost completely buried in the snow, their cries growing fainter by the moment. Clara knew she had no time to waste. Her breath fogged in the freezing air as she removed her scarf and gently wrapped it around the puppies, cradling their trembling bodies close to her chest. The mother dog, too weak to resist, let out a faint whimper as Clara began working on the chain. She used her gloved hands to unthread it from the post, the cold metal burning against her fingers. Finally, with one last tug, the chain came free. "Grace," Clara whispered, as she noticed the name engraved on the worn leather collar around the dog's neck. It was a simple name, but it struck Clara deeply. "Is that your name? Don't worry, Grace, I've got you now." With great effort, Clara lifted the emaciated mother dog into her arms, her body alarmingly light. Balancing the puppies wrapped in her scarf, Clara turned back toward the cabin, her boots crunching heavily in the snow. The storm whipped around her, fierce and unrelenting, but Clara pressed on, her determination fueled by the lives depending on her. By the time she reached the cabin, Clara's face was numb, and her arms ached from the weight of her precious cargo. She kicked open the door, the warm glow of the fireplace immediately embracing them like a lifeline. Clara carefully laid Grace on a soft blanket near the fire, arranging the puppies around their mother. The tiny creatures burrowed instinctively into her side, their trembling slowly easing as the warmth began to seep in. Clara sat back on her heels, her breath heavy from the effort. She watched as Grace stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. The dog's gaze met Clara's, and in that fleeting connection, Clara felt an unspoken gratitude and trust. "You're safe now," Clara said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "No one will ever hurt you again." As the puppies began to thaw, their cries turned into soft whimpers, and one by one they nestled closer to Grace. Clara fetched a small bowl of warm milk, carefully coaxing the weakest puppy to lap at it. The others followed suit, their tiny tongues darting out hesitantly. Meanwhile, Clara inspected Grace more closely. The mother dog's body was a roadmap of neglect. Her ribs jutted out sharply, and the wound from the chain around her neck was raw and angry. Clara's chest tightened as she gently stroked Grace's head. "Whoever did this to you doesn't deserve to call themselves human," she muttered. The night stretched on, and Clara remained by the fire, tending to her unexpected guests. She cleaned Grace's wound as best as she could, murmuring soothing words to calm the dog's faint whimpers of pain. The puppies, now warmed and fed, fell into an exhausted sleep, their tiny bodies curled up against their mother. As the storm raged outside, Clara couldn't shake the questions swirling in her mind. Who had abandoned them like this? Why leave them chained in such brutal conditions, with no chance of survival? The engraved collar suggested that Grace had once been cared for, loved even, but something had gone terribly wrong. Clara leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the small family lying by the fire. Despite the anger and sadness she felt, there was also a flicker of resolve. Whatever Grace and her puppies had endured, it was over now. They were safe, and Clara silently vowed to uncover the truth and give them the life they deserved. As the first rays of dawn broke through the storm, the cabin was filled with a peaceful stillness. Grace and her puppies slept soundly, their fragile bodies finally free from the cruel grip of the cold. Clara watched over them, her heart heavy but full of determination. Their story was just beginning. The storm had passed, leaving Havenwood cloaked in a serene blanket of snow that sparkled under the pale winter sun. Inside Clara's cozy cabin, life stirred with new purpose. Grace, the golden retriever, lay by the fire with her 6 puppies nestled close. The warmth of the hearth seemed to melt away the despair of the previous night, but Clara knew the journey ahead would be far from easy. For the first few days, Clara devoted herself entirely to the little family. She quickly realized that each of the puppies had a unique personality that set them apart. The 2 strongest boys, Buddy and Max, were energetic and curious, often tussling with each other in playful bursts. The 2 girls, Sunny and Daisy, were full of life and enthusiasm, their wagging tails a constant blur of motion. Meanwhile, the smallest pups, Lucky and Milo, displayed a mischievous streak, always poking their noses where they didn't belong. Clara smiled as she observed their antics. Despite their rocky start in life, the puppies were beginning to thrive under her care. They grew stronger each day, their golden coats shining brighter as their health improved. She fed them warm milk and soft food, ensuring their tiny bellies were always full. The cabin, once a place of solitude, was now alive with the sound of their soft barks and scampering paws. While the puppies grew stronger, Grace's condition seemed to worsen. The once proud mother dog spent most of her time lying near the fire, her breaths shallow and labored. She ate sparingly, despite Clara's attempts to coax her with special meals. Each passing day, Clara grew more concerned. One afternoon, Clara decided it was time to seek professional help. She bundled Grace and the puppies into her old truck and drove to the nearest veterinary clinic. The snow-covered roads stretched endlessly, but Clara's determination kept her going. When they finally arrived, she was greeted by Dr. Emily Carter, a kind and experienced veterinarian who had worked in Havenwood for years. Dr. Carter examined Grace thoroughly, her brow furrowing as she ran her hands gently over the dog's emaciated frame. "Clara," she began softly, "I suspect Grace has osteosarcoma, bone cancer. It's common in larger breeds like golden retrievers, and given her condition, it's likely in an advanced stage." Clara's heart sank. "Is there anything we can do for her?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Carter sighed. "I'm afraid the cancer has likely spread. At this point, it's about keeping her comfortable and managing her pain. She might only have a few weeks left." Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Then I'll make sure those weeks are the best of her life." Back at the cabin, Clara resolved to give Grace the love and care she deserved. She rearranged the furniture to create a cozy space near the fire, complete with soft blankets and pillows. The puppies instinctively stayed close to their mother, offering warmth and companionship. Despite her weakening body, Grace's eyes still held a quiet strength. Clara often sat by her side, stroking her head and whispering words of comfort. "You're not alone, Grace," she would say. "I'll be here with you every step of the way." Clara also found ways to involve Grace in simple, joyful activities. On clear days, she would carry Grace outside, letting her feel the crisp winter air and the soft touch of sunlight on her fur. The puppies, now full of energy, would bound around in the snow, chasing each other and tumbling over their tiny paws. Clara could see the faintest wag of Grace's tail as she watched her pups play. As the days passed, the puppies' personalities became even more distinct. Buddy, the largest of the litter, often took on a protective role, standing tall and barking at the slightest sound. Max, ever curious, would wander off to investigate corners of the cabin, his nose always leading the way. Sunny and Daisy were inseparable, their playful antics filling the room with laughter. Lucky and Milo, the smallest but most mischievous, often got into trouble, whether it was knocking over a bowl of milk or tugging at Clara's knitting yarn. Clara couldn't help but chuckle at their antics. "You're a handful, all of you," she said one evening, watching the puppies wrestle on the rug, "but you've brought life back into this old cabin." She began to document their moments together, taking photographs and jotting down memories in a small journal. Clara wanted to cherish every second, knowing these days were precious for both the puppies and Grace. Though Grace grew weaker, she remained a source of calm and stability for her pups. Clara often marveled at the mother dog's resilience. Despite her pain, Grace never failed to nuzzle her puppies, her gentle touch offering them reassurance and love. Clara saw in Grace a profound strength, a determination to hold on for her pups as long as she could. One particularly cold evening, Clara sat by the fire, Grace's head resting on her lap. The puppies were curled up together, their tiny bodies rising and falling with peaceful breaths. Clara stroked Grace's head, her fingers brushing against the worn leather collar. She thought back to the day she found them, chained and abandoned, and felt a deep sadness mixed with gratitude. "You're safe now," she whispered, "and no matter what happens, you'll always be loved." As the weeks went on, Clara and Grace formed an unbreakable bond. Clara often found herself talking to Grace, sharing stories of her late husband and the quiet loneliness she had felt before the little family came into her life. Grace would look up at her with those soulful brown eyes, as if she understood every word. "You've given me more than you know," Clara admitted one night, tears brimming in her eyes. "You've reminded me what it means to care for someone, to love unconditionally." Despite the inevitable, Clara found strength in knowing she was making Grace's final days full of warmth and love. She focused on the simple joys, the wag of a tail, the playful yips of the puppies, the soft glow of the fire casting their shadows on the cabin walls. One evening, as the snow began to fall again outside, Clara made a silent promise to Grace. She would ensure the puppies found loving homes when the time came. She would honor Grace's legacy by giving them the life she couldn't have, and she would cherish every moment they had left together. The cabin was quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the little family. Clara sat in her rocking chair, Grace lying peacefully by her feet, the puppies snuggled together in a warm pile. Outside, the storm had returned, but inside, the warmth of love and hope filled the air. Clara glanced down at Grace and the puppies, her heart full despite the sadness looming ahead. "You've brought light into my life," she said softly, "and I'll make sure that light never fades." The gentle light of the winter sun filtered through the frosted windows of Clara's cabin, casting long, warm shadows across the wooden floor. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, its glow wrapping the room in a cocoon of comfort. Grace, the frail golden retriever mother, lay on her blanket near the fire, her emaciated body rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her 6 puppies, now healthier and more active, tumbled over one another, filling the quiet cabin with the soft sounds of their play. Clara sat nearby, watching them with a mixture of joy and concern. Grace had been growing weaker with each passing day, her energy waning despite the care and love Clara poured into her. It was as though the weight of her past struggles still lingered, pressing down on her spirit. Clara's eyes drifted to the leather collar around Grace's neck. It was old and cracked, worn from years of use. She had noticed it the day she found Grace, but hadn't had the heart to remove it until now. She decided that this was the moment. With Grace resting peacefully, Clara reached out and gently unbuckled the collar. The worn leather felt heavy in her hands, carrying the weight of Grace's untold story. As she turned it over, her fingers brushed against a small slit in the inside lining. Curious, Clara carefully pried it open and discovered a folded piece of paper tucked tightly within the seam. Her breath caught as she unfolded the paper. The edges were frayed and the ink was smudged, but the words were still legible. Written in shaky, uneven handwriting, the letter read, "I am a poor old woman who has just lost my home because I couldn't afford the rent. I now live in an old truck and can't take care of Grace and her puppies in this terrible weather. I had no choice but to leave them here, near your house, because I know you are kind. Please forgive me and save them." Clara's hands trembled as she held the letter. The words painted a vivid picture of a woman forced into unimaginable hardship, making an impossible choice. Clara's mind filled with images of the woman, alone, cold and overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for Grace and her 6 tiny puppies in the harshest of conditions. Her heart ached at the thought of the desperation that must have driven such a decision. She glanced at Grace, who stirred slightly in her sleep, her thin body curling protectively around her puppies. The letter explained so much: the chain, the abandonment, the placement near Clara's cabin. The woman had known she couldn't provide for Grace and her pups, but had hoped Clara could. It wasn't cruelty that had left them there. It was desperation and faith. "Oh, Grace," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "She didn't leave you because she didn't care. She left you because she loved you too much to watch you suffer." Clara sat in silence for a long moment, holding the letter tightly. The sadness she felt for Grace and the puppies now extended to the woman who had written those words. She imagined the pain of leaving them behind, the hope mingled with despair, and the courage it must have taken to trust a stranger with such a precious burden. After carefully refolding the letter, Clara placed it on the mantel above the fire. It would stay there, a reminder of the woman's sacrifice and the trust she had placed in Clara. That trust ignited a deeper sense of purpose in Clara's heart. She wasn't just caring for Grace and her puppies, she was fulfilling a promise, spoken through the words of the letter. Clara turned her attention back to Grace, who had woken up and was watching her with tired, soulful eyes. Clara knelt beside her and gently stroked her head. "You're safe now," she said softly. "And no matter what happens, I'll take care of you and your little ones." The days that followed were filled with both joy and determination. Clara cared for the puppies with unwavering dedication, ensuring they had everything they needed to grow strong and healthy. Buddy and Max continued to assert themselves as the leaders of the litter, their playful energy filling the cabin with life. Sunny and Daisy brought a spark of cheerfulness to even the darkest days, their tails wagging in unison. Lucky and Milo, the smallest of the group, remained curious explorers, often getting themselves into trouble. Each puppy's unique personality reminded Clara of the resilience and joy that could emerge even from the hardest circumstances. They had started life in the harshest of conditions, yet here they were, thriving under her care. Grace, however, continued to decline. Her appetite dwindled, and her once shining coat grew dull. Clara could see the pain in her eyes, but Grace's love for her puppies never wavered. She nuzzled them gently whenever they approached her, her presence a source of calm and reassurance. Clara often sat beside Grace during the quiet hours of the evening, her thoughts returning to the letter. The woman's words had stirred something deep within her, a need to not only care for Grace and the puppies, but to honor the trust placed in her. Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything possible to ensure Grace's remaining time was filled with love and dignity, and she would find the perfect homes for each of the puppies when the time came. One snowy morning, Clara decided to write her own letter. She pulled out a small journal and began to pen her thoughts. "To whoever wrote that letter, I want you to know that Grace and her puppies are safe. Grace is loved and her puppies are thriving. I will make sure they have the life they deserve. Thank you for trusting me to care for them. I promise I won't let you down." Tears blurred her vision as she wrote, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude and resolve. Clara placed the journal next to the letter on the mantel, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She was part of something bigger now, a story that had started long before Grace and her puppies arrived at her door. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Clara looked over at Grace and the puppies, their small bodies curled together in peaceful slumber. Despite the challenges ahead, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Grace and her family were no longer abandoned, they were home. Clara hesitated for a long time before sharing Grace's story with her neighbors. It felt deeply personal, a tale of despair, resilience, and hope that had completely changed her life. Yet, as she cared for Grace and her 6 puppies, the strain began to show. Trips to the vet, constant cleaning, feeding 6 growing pups, and managing Grace's declining health. It was more than one woman could handle alone. One evening, as Clara spoke to her closest neighbor, Millie, the story came spilling out. She told Millie about finding Grace and the puppies chained in the blizzard, about the letter hidden in Grace's collar, and about the woman who had sacrificed everything to ensure the dogs had a chance at survival. Millie, a kind-hearted woman who ran Havenwood's only bakery, listened intently, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Clara," Millie said firmly, "you're doing an incredible thing, but this isn't just your burden to bear. Havenwood takes care of its own, and that includes you." The next day, the story spread like wildfire. Millie, known for her warm personality and excellent pies, made sure to tell everyone who came into her shop about Grace and her puppies. By the end of the week, nearly everyone in Havenwood had heard about Clara's act of kindness and the heartbreaking circumstances that brought Grace and her puppies to her doorstep. People were moved not only by Clara's dedication, but by the selflessness of the homeless woman who had left Grace in Clara's care. The tale touched a nerve in the community, reminding them of the power of compassion and the importance of helping others, even in the smallest ways. It was Millie who first suggested creating the Grace Fund. "If we all chip in, Clara," she explained over coffee in Clara's kitchen, "we can help you care for Grace and those sweet puppies. You shouldn't have to do it alone." Clara was hesitant at first. She wasn't used to asking for help and prided herself on her independence, but Millie was insistent, and before Clara could argue, the plan was already in motion. A donation jar appeared on the counter of Millie's bakery the very next day, with a hand-drawn sign that read, "Help Grace and her puppies thrive." The community responded immediately. Coins, bills, and even handwritten notes of encouragement filled the jar within days. Word spread beyond the bakery, and soon donations were pouring in from all over town. The local hardware store contributed a new dog bed, and a retired seamstress volunteered to sew warm blankets for Grace and her puppies. One of Clara's neighbours, a carpenter, built a sturdy puppy gate to keep the energetic little ones safe. During a community meeting at the bakery, Millie suggested another idea. "We all know Grace's time is limited," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "Why don't we make a bucket list for her? Let's give her the joy and love she's missed out on before it's too late." The room buzzed with excitement as neighbours brainstormed ideas for the list. Clara sat quietly, overwhelmed by the love and support radiating from the people around her. By the end of the meeting, they had created a list of simple, meaningful activities to give Grace the happiest days of her life. A peaceful walk through the snow-covered woods, a cosy picnic by the fire with her puppies, a play date for the puppies at the town park, a special roast chicken dinner just for Grace, a family photo session to capture their bond forever. The first item on the list was a snowy walk through the woods. On a crisp, clear morning, Clara bundled herself up, gently placed a warm coat over Grace, and ventured outside. Grace moved slowly, her steps careful but deliberate. The 6 puppies bounded ahead, their tiny paws leaving tracks in the untouched snow. The woods were peaceful, the silence broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their feet and the joyful yips of the puppies. Grace paused frequently, sniffing the air and letting the crisp winter breeze ruffle her fur. Clara stayed close, her hand resting gently on Grace's back, offering support and encouragement. Neighbours who happened to pass by stopped to wave or snap photos of the heartwarming scene. Grace, once abandoned and forgotten, now walked with dignity, surrounded by love and care. The faint wag of her tail spoke volumes. The next item on the bucket list was a cosy indoor picnic. Millie and several other neighbours helped Clara prepare for the event, bringing everything from fresh baked bread to blankets and pillows to create a warm, inviting space near the fireplace. Clara made sure Grace had a prime spot by the fire, where she could rest comfortably while the puppies played nearby. Millie roasted a chicken to perfection, and when it was placed before Grace, her tail wagged furiously for the first time in weeks. She devoured the meal eagerly, her appetite finally returning, while the puppies nibbled on small portions prepared just for them. The picnic turned into an impromptu gathering, with neighbours stopping by to check on Grace and the puppies. Laughter filled the cabin as the puppies tumbled over one another, their playful antics drawing smiles and cheers from everyone present. As Grace's health continued to decline, Clara and the community knew it was important to preserve the moments they shared. A local photographer volunteered her time to take professional photos of Grace and her puppies. The photo session took place in Clara's living room, where the fire cast a warm, golden glow. Grace sat regally on her new dog bed, her 6 puppies nestled around her. Clara joined them for a few photos, her arms wrapped lovingly around Grace and the little ones. The photographer captured moments of pure joy, Grace nuzzling one of her puppies, Clara laughing as Lucky tried to chew on her scarf, and all 6 puppies piling onto Clara's lap in a wriggling heap. When the photos were printed, Clara placed one in a frame on her mantel, right next to the letter that had started it all. It was a testament to how far Grace had come, and how much love she had found along the way. Thanks to the Grace Fund and the unwavering support of Havenwood, Clara was able to provide everything Grace and her puppies needed. More than that, the love and care of the community gave Grace something she had long been missing: joy. Though her body remained frail, Grace's spirit grew stronger. She wagged her tail more often, her eyes brightened, and she began to seek out affection from the people who visited. Clara marveled at the transformation, knowing it was the result of everyone's combined efforts. One quiet evening, as Clara sat by the fire with Grace resting peacefully at her feet, she reflected on all that had happened. The once lonely cabin was now filled with warmth and love, and the people of Havenwood had become more than neighbors. They were family. "You've brought us all together, Grace," Clara whispered, stroking the dog's head, "and you've reminded us all of what really matters." Grace opened her eyes briefly, nuzzled Clara's hand, and let out a contented sigh. Outside, the snow fell softly, but inside, the cabin glowed with the light of hope, love, and the unbreakable bond between a small town and one extraordinary dog. The winter days passed gently in Havenwood, each one bringing moments of bittersweet joy for Clara and Grace. The once abandoned golden retriever, now surrounded by love and care, was experiencing the life she had always deserved. Though Grace's body grew weaker with each passing day, her spirit shone brightly, a testament to the transformative power of compassion. Clara, ever by her side, ensured that Grace's final days were filled with warmth, dignity, and love. One crisp morning, Clara decided to take Grace and the puppies outside to enjoy the fresh snow. The backyard was a dazzling white canvas, the sunlight dancing off the icy crystals. Clara bundled Grace in a cozy coat and opened the door to the yard. The 6 puppies tumbled out first, their boundless energy sending them darting in every direction. Grace followed slowly, her steps measured but steady. The puppies quickly turned the snow into their playground, leaping into snowdrifts, tumbling over one another and barking with delight. Buddy and Max wrestled in a spirited game, while Sunny and Daisy chased their own tails, leaving delicate trails in the snow. Lucky and Milo, the smallest and most mischievous, burrowed into a snowbank, emerging moments later with their faces dusted in frost. Clara knelt beside Grace, watching the puppies with a smile. "Look at them, Grace," she said softly. "So full of life. You've given them so much." Grace wagged her tail faintly and let out a soft huff, her brown eyes watching her puppies with a mix of love and pride. Clara could see that, despite her frailty, Grace was happy. For the first time in what must have been a long and difficult life, she was surrounded by peace and joy. The townsfolk of Havenwood continued to play a vital role in making Grace's final days extraordinary. The Grace Fund, now brimming with donations, provided everything Clara needed to care for Grace and the puppies. But more than material support, the community gave something even more valuable: their time and affection. Neighbors often stopped by Clara's cabin with treats and toys for the puppies, or simply to visit with Grace. Children from the local school drew pictures of Grace and her family, which Clara proudly displayed on the walls of her living room. Grace had become a symbol of resilience and hope, her story inspiring everyone who heard it. One snowy afternoon, the town organized a small gathering in the park to celebrate Grace. They built a cozy fire pit, brought warm drinks, and set up a play area for the puppies. Grace, nestled in a warm blanket on Clara's lap, watched as her puppies ran and played with the neighborhood children. Their laughter echoed through the park, a joyful melody that seemed to warm even the coldest corners of the winter day. Millie, the baker who had spearheaded the Grace Fund, knelt beside Clara and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Look at what you've done," she said. "You've given her a life filled with love, and you've brought all of us together. That's a gift we'll never forget." Clara blinked back tears and stroked Grace's head. "She's the one who's given us the gift," she replied. "She's reminded us what it means to care for one another." Back at the cabin, Clara made sure to fill every day with little joys for Grace. On one evening, Millie delivered a perfectly roasted chicken, specially prepared for Grace. Clara placed it in a dish by the fire, where Grace slowly ate, savoring each bite. The puppies sat nearby, noses twitching, as Clara handed them small pieces of chicken, ensuring they all shared in the feast. On another day, Clara and Grace sat by the window, watching as the snow fell gently outside. Clara read aloud from an old book, her voice soft and soothing, while Grace rested her head on Clara's lap. The puppies were sprawled across the rug, their tiny bodies rising and falling in peaceful sleep. It was a moment of quiet serenity, the kind of peace that Clara knew Grace had long deserved. One of Clara's favorite moments was the photo session organized by a local photographer. Grace and the puppies were positioned in front of the fireplace, their golden coats glowing in the warm light. Clara joined them for a few photos, wrapping her arms around Grace as the puppies tumbled over her lap. The resulting pictures captured the love and joy that now defined Grace's life, and Clara placed one in a frame on her mantel. As Grace's strength continued to wane, Clara knew their time together was growing short. Determined to make the most of every moment, she decided to take Grace on one final walk through the snow-covered woods. Clara wrapped Grace in a thick blanket and carried her outside, setting her down gently in the crisp, cold air. The puppies followed close behind, their tiny paws crunching in the snow. Grace moved slowly, her steps careful and deliberate, but her tail wagged faintly with each step. The woods were quiet, the snow muffling all sound except for the soft rustle of branches in the breeze. Clara stayed close, her hand resting on Grace's back, offering silent encouragement. The puppies ran ahead, their playful yips echoing through the trees, but they always circled back to check on their mother. As they reached a small clearing, Clara knelt beside Grace, who was now resting. The sunlight streamed through the branches, casting a golden glow over the snow. "This is your place now," Clara said softly, stroking Grace's head. "Peaceful, safe, and filled with love." Grace leaned into Clara's touch, her eyes closing in contentment. In the final days of her life, Grace experienced more love and joy than many animals ever know. Clara remained by her side, ensuring she was never alone or in pain. The puppies, ever full of life, provided a constant source of comfort, their playful antics bringing smiles even in the most somber moments. When the time came, Grace passed peacefully in Clara's arms, surrounded by warmth and love. Clara held her tightly, her tears falling softly onto Grace's golden fur. It was a moment of profound loss, but also one of gratitude. Grace had been given the gift of a life well loved, and she had given Clara and the entire town of Havenwood something irreplaceable in return. Clara buried Grace beneath the old oak tree in her yard, marking the spot with a simple stone engraved with her name, Grace, a loyal heart, a gentle spirit. The puppies gathered around as Clara placed a bouquet of fresh flowers on the grave, their small, warm bodies pressing against her for comfort. Though the loss was heavy, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. Grace's story had touched countless lives, bringing a community together and reminding them all of the enduring power of love and compassion. Clara stood by the grave for a long time, her hand resting gently on the stone. "You were never abandoned, Grace," she whispered. "You were always loved, and you always will be." Grace's story reminds us all of the power of love, faith, and kindness to transform lives. Abandoned in a storm, she found hope through Clara's compassion and the Havenwood community's generosity. In her final days, Grace experienced the love she always deserved, a reflection of God's mercy and a call for us to care for His creation. As you reflect on this story, share your own moments of kindness in the comments below. May God bless you and guide you to bring hope and love to those in need. Thank you for watching, and may His grace be with you always.